There is no hood like Parenthood. Hi, I'm Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of 3, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. Now, if I had $1 every time I heard, gee, you have your hands full. On my show, I interview change makers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, which I call our mom sense and dad sense. I've had the privilege of working with Mom 2.0, March of Dimes, and the White House, and have had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton.
It's me, Bobbi Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
That's Total Mom Sense is a production of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. To join my tribe, visit that'stotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. Now let's dive into today's episode. You're tuning in to That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast for parents and caregivers where we can exchange stories to learn from one another and build a collective legacy. I'm your host, Kanika Chadda Gupta, television journalist, podcast host, and mom of 3, including twins. I grew up in a Punjabi home where we loved our Rajma Chawal and spoke Hindi fluently. I learned to read and write it, and I trained in Kuchipudi Indian classical dance and Hindustani vocal music. And I am so proud that I get to pass on these traditions to my 3 kids. This AAPI month, I am proud to partner with Lexus to bring you AAPI Voices, where we'll be profiling 3 powerhouse South Asian women on how they're redefining culture and building community. From fashion to food to wellness, these women are bringing their full selves to the table. Heritage in one hand and hustle in the other, all while navigating motherhood in the modern day. So buckle up because we're taking you on a special ride. You're listening to That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast that helps you trust your inner voice, your intuition, which I call your mom sense and dad sense. I'm your host, Kanika Chadda Gupta. This AAPI Heritage Month, we're celebrating women who are beautifully blending heritage, heart, and hustle in style. Today's guest is the radiant MARYAM ISHTIAQ, a content creator, home chef, and devoted wife and mom of 2. Whether she's sharing her vibrant recipes from her Pakistani roots, showcasing her cozy home aesthetic and her looks, or keeping it real about motherhood on social media, MARYAM does it with grace and authenticity. We're going to be recording this episode virtually. So she is at her home in Texas. And I'm just so glad that we're spending this time together, MARYAM. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so happy that this worked out and we're able to do this together. Yeah, I'm super excited.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we've known each other for a while now, and I know it started with me sliding into your Instagram DMs because back in the day you were in New York, and I just loved everything you were covering from a marketing standpoint to Fashion Week, and you just always had your finger on the pulse of what was trending. So I love that about you, and I know so many of my listeners have been following your journey since then too.
I think that was almost like 5 years ago. I think, yeah, it's almost 5 years ago.
Yes, that's amazing. Okay, let's take it back even farther when MARYAM was just a young girl growing up. What was it like at home for you? And tell us a bit about your upbringing.
So I was actually born and raised in Saudi. I moved to Pakistan. I went to school in Pakistan for a couple of years, and my memories of my childhood have always been around food. My grandma and my mom used to make lots and lots of food. So we actually had, part of our family lived on the village and we lived closer to the village. And so by default, we would always go there on the weekends and kind of hang out with our family there. And my memories of our village has been the aunties would make a spread, and you would sit there and you would have like the mango lassi, you would have a paratha, and you would have like, makai ki roti, like all those things. And that's what I remember from my childhood of how much we came together over food. And I think at some point in that part of my life, I also fell in love with the idea of hosting and cooking and just giving back to community. So yeah, it's I think back and I'm like I remember sitting on the kitchen counters and just watching grandma and mom like just make kana and like, you know, just kind of taking it all in. And now I got to do the same by taking those recipes and making them my own and passing it on to my kids.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And I love that you and your husband Nabil are in the kitchen together. Because I know I've learned this through my husband. He's like a Pakka Punjabi, and the best way to a man's heart is through his stomach, and he just loves when I make his favorite food.
Yeah, he's not Punjabi, so it's always been very interesting for him to kind of see how my family operates. And,
Yeah.
they have smaller spreads. He's from Karachi, and so they have smaller spreads when they're sitting down and eating, while we have like an entire table. And like, unless it looks like a buffet table, like you're not eating.
You're not
So it was yeah, it was very interesting for him to like kind of get familiarized with how we do hosting.
That's so sweet. Well, tell our audience how you and Nabil met.
I was still in college. He was graduating college, and I was, I think, about to be a sophomore in college. We met at a restaurant. He was hanging out with his friend post gym, I guess, and I was there with a friend of mine. And yeah, conversation started. I personally was like not into it really because I was like, like I'm here to just hang out with my girlfriend. Like I don't know who these guys are. But I feel like every story somehow starts that way. And so we kind of like, kept talking. We became really good friends, and yeah, rest is history.
That's so sweet. And tell us about how the families got together, because I feel like that's something so poignant and relevant to our culture too, that it's like a blending of obviously the couple, but families too.
So we actually had our families get together almost like I think we met in 2012. Our families didn't meet till like 2015, I would say.
Oh, wow.
It was a
Well, I
long.
like that though, because you need to feel it out first, just you
And the
two.
thing was, like, he had just moved, so he moved to Maryland, and he was working in DC area, while I was still finishing up college, and the whole idea was that I wanted to graduate before I could even think about, getting married or settling down. And, while long distance is always hard, it gave me the opportunity to kind of really grow into me and grow into what I wanted life to be after. So I finished up college, did my major, and then, asked the families to get together. Obviously, getting them to come on board was also a little different because, like I am the oldest and I'm the oldest girl in my family, and I'm the only girl. So my parents were like, "Who is this boy?" Um, I was like, "He's an engineer."
Right, right.
But,
Yeah.
like, so those are the things that you have to, like, kind of, like, tell your parents about, because at that time, like, you have to remember, like, unless you were, like, in a traditional career path, like, finding a girl or a boy was, like, not a thing. You either had to marry a doctor, you had to marry an engineer, or you had to marry a lawyer. Like, there was no way around it. And it was a very interesting process.
Yes, yes, and it's worth it in the end, you know? I feel like when you know, and sometimes there's some convincing that's involved, but then everyone's so happy, especially when the grandkids arrive.
Oh, yeah. Well, after you have kids, you would be so surprised to see how your parents react to them versus how they were with you. So it's like they almost make up for lost time, like things
Totally.
that you weren't able to do with us, they will do with the kids, and you're like, "You're telling me that I missed out on this, why?" But it's kind of neat. It's nice to see that they're, like, growing into themselves, and they're growing in this new role, and, raising the kids the way they wanna do, and they get to actually soak it all into. And I feel like when when they were parents and they were raising us, they didn't have that kind of time
Right.
to have that now.
Yes, yes. Well, tell us about your motherhood journey. What was that like?
So my motherhood journey started in the pandemic, and
Yeah.
it was a very interesting and isolating and lonely journey, unfortunately. But at the same time, it allowed me to really soak in and spend time with my oldest, Elise. I was still working. We were working from home. And I had a pretty like high risk pregnancy. So I was kind of glad that it worked out, the way it did, because I got to be home. I got to go through my pregnancy and then also go through postpartum, not worrying about having to go into office. Um, and then came Azina. So I've had like two little girls in the last like 4 years. And honestly, they're the best thing that has happened to me. I get to like really I didn't have sisters of my own, so kind of watching them be sisters to each other and best friends to each other really warms my heart because I get to really live my life through them in a way, and it's been super sweet.
That's amazing. I love it. I have a younger sister, and it's just the two of us, and we're still super, super close now. She's in the city, I'm in Jersey, and believe me, they're just built-in best friends for life. So it's a really special bond.
Yeah, I wish I had sisters of my own. I've been lucky enough to like find girlfriends and my daughters and like to be able to have that kind of sense of sisterhood. So I
Yeah.
think I'm blessed in that department.
Absolutely. I do want to, share about your sister-in-law, Beanish, who we've also bonded about. And this is something that, again, it's like you inherit this new family. And tell us a bit about her and your bond.
Ah, gosh. Apologies in advance. I have not really talked about her in some time, mainly because it still feels a little bit fresh. Um, Her and I were very like it's so weird. You would think that her and I were biological sisters versus sister-in-laws, which you don't get to say very often, right? Like when you think about like traditional sister-in-law relationships, you don't hear that you guys were close as if you guys were sisters. Um, we were literally attached to the hip. Anything that happened, the first call or text would be each other. A lot of our career trajectory was kind of meshed together. She lived so close to us. She would come over every weekend. I would make like a new recipe. I'm like, hey, you want to come over for dinner tonight? So it was like, I don't think there was a moment in my life in the last 8 years of my life where she wasn't a part of.
Mm,
And when you have somebody who's a part of your day to day, it gets really hard when suddenly they're not there because you actually don't know your life without that person. Um, so I am honestly like grateful that I got to experience what sisterhood would have been like. Yeah.
yeah, no, and I'm sorry, and I don't want it to be something
Oh
that
my God.
yeah,
Um,
it just I feel like she is still very much there,
uh,
and I want our listeners to understand because so many of us are grieving. We're in the sandwich generation. We have to feel the weight of losing parents and
yeah.
losing siblings or friends. You just never know what life is going to throw at you, and yeah, I guess can you tell our audience about like I guess ways that you are um, moving through those hard days because grief never ends.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think it definitely comes in waves. And I will say, grieving as a parent is so much harder because it feels like you have to like put a stop on your grieving journey because you have to be available for your kids. And my oldest daughter, Elise, was very close to Beanish, and um, when we lost my sister-in-law, Elise's world fell apart, and we had to kind of put a pause on our grief journey to make sure that we were available for her and help her navigate through that journey. So like when grief would hit, it would hit full throttle, and then it would feel like, you're never going to be able to get out of this. Um, I think I've fortunately and unfortunately, I think I've just been so busy with work that I don't get to sit and be alone in my thoughts to think about her. I miss her presence for sure, but I think just being busy, healthy or unhealthy, has allowed me to kind of just keep going, um, being there for the family, being there for my kids to make sure that they don't feel like, you know, they don't feel sad. We are starting to kind of move forward and get a little bit of that normalcy back, but at the same time, I would be lying if I said that we'll ever be the same.
My friend Vikas Khanna, he's a master chef and owns Bungalow. We were bonding about him losing his sister Radhika, and same thing. He said it never goes away because that was his best friend. But he told me about something that he does called sublimation, and he's like, somehow if you immerse yourself in something that makes you happy, and for him it's being in the kitchen and food, and serving others and seva, like it's like he's channeling her aura and light into something that he wants to spend his time and energy doing, and that's a way for him to just heal.
Yeah. And I think I definitely agree with him. I think, being in the culinary space, the reason I got into it the way I did was because it was therapy for me.
Mm.
Started when I had my pregnancy loss. I didn't know how to overcome that. And I just remember just like one day I was in the kitchen and I was like deep cleaning the stove.
Okay.
Like, just deep cleaning it. Like, almost like you have this lump in your throat and, like, you're feeling anxious and you don't know what kind of, like, feelings you're feeling, and so you kind of just immerse yourself into something, and I think women can agree or men can agree that, like,
Yeah.
cleaning ends up being the thing that you do.
Cleaning is
Uh,
therapy. Oh my gosh. Yeah. People say I have OCD. I'm so with you.
And then I remember I was just like, "You know what? I'm, like, a little tired," and I just started cooking, and I just remember, like, cooking something and just forgetting everything. It was like I was fully immersed into this one task, and I kid you not, I don't even know what I did that day. I have 0 recollection of it. I think it was, like, muscle memory, it was therapy, and we were, like, suddenly feeling 10 times better, and I was like, "Maybe this is it. Maybe this is what's supposed to get me out." And, fast forward to today, I'm like, it is therapy.
At That Total Mom Sense, we celebrate family, culture, and the everyday moments that matter most. And that's why I trust Lexus. Their cars are designed to make every journey unforgettable. This AAPI Heritage Month and beyond, Lexus honors the strength and stories of our community. Because when luxury meets legacy, the standard is amazing. Head to Lexus.com and follow Lexus USA on social media to find your next adventure. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so tell us how that took shape, because you had Thread and Sew, which was your company, and then into It's Actually. So take us through the whole journey.
So our journey in the social media space started with Pizza and Perrier. So this was like 2016, end of 2016, 2017. Nabil and I had met in 2012, and we always loved food and we loved like eating our way through just life in general. And I remember one day he like started this blog because he thought that like I would be really good at just creating content, and I was like, like I'm not a writer, so I don't know what you want me to do with this. Um, but we just kind of documented, like, our recipes, the things that we would, like, eat together, and we would post on the blog. Then I moved to New York, and we realized that maybe Pizza and Perrier was, like, not the right name because we didn't want Perrier to come after us. So we had to, like we're like, "This sounds great, but, like, I don't want a lawsuit."
Right, right.
So we had to, like, change the name, which then became Thread and Sew. Thread being the fashion aspect of my brand, and Sew being so forth and so on. Um and, you know and we were still creating content together at that time. Over the years, like, brand has to evolve, our seasons have changed, I have changed, and I've always been a consultant and contractor and entrepreneur, so, like, I had more flexibility with how I could move things around. He, however, always had 9 to 5. So, he either had to like be on that side or be on this side. It couldn't be both. And so we decided collectively that maybe it's time for us to not do the blog together. And so, we put a stop on our blog. We dissolved everything, and it led into 2019, which is the year that I was expecting, and 2020 is when I had Elise. And now it's actually came to be from that part of our life. And I would like to, like, I would just say that every season that we've had, had like a chapter, and the more we've evolved and grown, the more our brand has evolved and grown. So it's just really interesting to see like food came back full circle in some way. And I get to really like embrace it for what it is now.
That's so cool. And tell us about your brand, It's Actually, and just the calming comfort food broths that you're creating from scratch.
Yeah, so I actually, during the pandemic, like, I grew up on drinking yakni for everything. Broth
Mhm.
is called yakni in Urdu and Punjabi. So I grew up like drinking that for literally everything. You're getting sick, drink broth. You have sinuses, drink broth. You have a
Right.
headache, drink, like literally anything and everything. I, again, like having gone through a really awful pregnancy, I wasn't able to like really absorb nutrients the same way you would if you were to eat food. And I needed to take iron transfusions. Um, and the only way that I could like keep things down is if I would have broth. And now like my mom and grandma aren't around, and store-bought stuff wasn't cutting it because it was like overly like full of sodium and other preservatives. So I started making broths at home. And I remember just kind of sharing the process online because I was just like, hey, like this is part of my pregnancy and my postpartum journey. And people were like, yeah, like this, yeah, this is great. And it started like helping others. And I told myself that if there was ever a product or a business that I was going to do, it would be to heal others in some way or give back in some way. Um, Fast forward to now, we get to do that. And, it's actually is a brand that, broth is the first thing that we come out with, but that's not all that we want to do. And, funny enough that women that are buying our broths are also going through similar journey of where I was. And I would say like 80% of our customers ended up being, unfortunately, cancer patients, who had access to like clean ingredients or broths that were made in traditional manner. And being able to kind of serve community in that way has really, really helped us keep going. It feels like we're doing what we were supposed to do, and it's working, and people can relate to the mission, they can relate to the product, they love the product. And I honestly am so grateful that we were able to do this and create this and keep going forward and hopefully put out more things.
That is so cool. I love it. Do you have any of the bottles handy by chance?
I do in the pantry. This is our chicken bone broth, and we recently rebranded, so this was like a baby that we had been working on for quite some time. And this is our beef broth. It's called Cattle Craft. Similar concept. Yeah, little babies.
I love it. I love it. What are some retailers that you're currently working with where we can find these broths in addition to your website?
So we wanted to focus more on our, direct to consumer, being able to provide them to a larger audience. But we also wanted to kind of work with small businesses to stock up in certain locations, where we have more of our customer bases. So we're currently here in Dallas at Dallas Farmers Market, a place called Kelly Produce. We work with a local grocery store in like Plano, Greenvine Market. Then we're at the Indie Shelf in Philly. And then we are at Model Town town in Chicago, and we have a few other ones that we're working on in Missouri City and Atlanta and New York. So it's like, we're starting to like kind of find places that align well with our brand, especially in communities that are underserved when it comes to quality of food. We wanted to go that route before we even thought about going into major retailers.
Yes, yes, I love that. It's truly homegrown. And we can't wait to see it like everywhere. I think it's a success story that we as a community can all celebrate. So I know that's happening, inshallah.
I for whoever's listening, I was like, South Asian broths don't exist. So if you need, um, it's true, right? Like it's such a big part of South Asian culture and just Asian culture in general, and not having brands that are like, owned by South Asian, women or men, like it's hard. Why isn't this a thing? Why aren't we putting out
Yeah.
more products like this? And so fingers crossed.
Yes, yes. Oh, it's happening. Definitely happening. Now tell us about your journey as a chef and how that took you to TV.
The funny thing is, people think that because they know you on social media, they know everything about you.
Yeah.
And as much as people like to be transparent, or somebody is transparent, there's always going to be part of their life that you may not know about. And this was a similar thing that was going on when I was in the fashion and beauty space in New York, right? Like people saw me as a content creator, but they didn't know that I was working as consultant and I was working as, in startups. And that was a big thing of my career. And, once that part kind of like, trickled down to when I had moved to Dallas, I went full into cooking being my therapy. And I was taking classes and I was, doing a lot of like training and stuff on the back end. And I think people didn't see that part. So when the show came out, they were like, wait, what? And I think it was like a hard launch on social media, honestly, but I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. My mom like runs her catering business, and she does her own thing, and I've always been a part of this space. And honestly, when I applied for the show, I didn't even think that I was going to get on the show. It was honestly like one night I was sleeping and I was like, it'd be really cool if I competed on a cooking show. And I like filled out an application and I went to sleep. And I didn't hear back for quite some time because I had applied for a certain season and I didn't get a call back. And I was like, oh, well, like maybe this ship has sailed. I had my interviews happening while Beanish was still visiting, doing her work travel. And I was going to tell her about it when she got back. And, after she passed, I think 2 days later, I got a call saying, are you ready to go be on the show? And I remember just sitting there and I'm like, it had to be her. She went up there and it had to be her who was bad. Like, get her on the show.
That magic and
yeah, it was just such a like, it's so funny how things worked out.
yeah.
I remember like flying to shoot the show and I was just like, I can't believe that I'm here and the one person I would have called about it is not here.
Home cooks, welcome to the newest season.
TV's toughest cooking competition is back.
And that smile is about to be wiped off their face.
Fox Thursday.
Does any of this stuff work?
Starting from the bottom.
Go, guys, grab ingredients.
We're definitely in the trenches.
The home cooks try and make the cut.
I said get the pan hot, don't burn the kitchen down.
While the mentors make the drama.
He asked me if he wanted to do an alliance against you.
Oh my God.
Next Level Chef. All new Thursday on Fox.
What'd you get? Chicken thighs?
I'm making tandoori chicken and
Love
then bring it together with some yogurt sauce.
Yeah.
My kids love it. My
Love it.
husband loves it.
What is that?
It's heavy cream and green pepper.
Great flavour in there, yes?
I have a Pakistani background.
Pakistan, beautiful. I mean, some of the best food in Pakistan.
Absolutely
I mean,
spicy.
oh my
and
God. Yeah, fragrant.
amazing. Yeah.
Amazing. Next up is from MARYAM. Her take on a tandoori chicken with yogurt.
Lovely freshness coming off of homemade yogurt, girl. Incredible.
chicken's delicious. That Pakistani foundation, what you grew up with, is evident here, and it's strong. Well done.
I've always been in the culinary space in some way on the back end, even when I was working at a baby food startup as their head of creative. And recipe development was a big thing. And then, while the show was happening, I was also doing private chef gigs. So I was building a community here in Dallas. And I had, pretty good clients. I take on like 2 to 3 clients a month. And I work really closely on intimate dining experience. And once the show came out, it was nice to kind of be on the show, meet other chefs and work with them and learn so much from them. And now we get to like create a dining experience, the 7th course, which is with a few of my, friends that I met at the show, Austin and Brandon, and we get to bring these dining experience to other cities. And it's just so like exciting to do because we all like share so much like this passion for food and kind of share it with everybody else.
Wow. You know what I love? I mean, because I think, for those who do like cooking, there's cooking and eating to satiate, but like your presentation and the way you plate everything is just so like gorgeous. It's so aesthetic and tasteful, pun intended. I love it. I really do. Is there like a hack that you can give, us who are just cooking at home for our families to make it feel like, okay, this is like taking it up a notch and it looks a little more gourmet?
I wish there was like really a straightforward answer on that, but I will say like there's no better way to learn than like fully experiencing it hands-on. And I think I'm already a creative as is, and being a part of social media, everything always had to look aesthetic, and so like there was that, but then also I'm such a visual person that like if I go out to eat or if I like watch something or if I'm like reading something, I remember things the way they looked on plate. I remember the notes I tasted. And when I'm cooking and I'm kind of when I'm in the kitchen, like I remember those notes and I remember what things look like. And then I kind of use that as an inspiration to create something of my own.
Nice.
And I think that is how I've always learned. And then again, like being in the same room with like other chefs has also allowed me to gain so much more experience and learn so much more. So I get to kind of take that and grow from that as well.
I love it. And what about bringing your kids into the kitchen? Like, do you have them kind of prepping alongside you just so that they can feel like they're getting involved?
Oh my God. Elise is the funny thing is like she, after the show specifically, when she saw me on TV, she has now started saying like, Mom, I can't wait to be a chef. Which is so sweet because like, like I remember like when I was a kid and like one thing that was like always embedded into our brain was like, you have to become a doctor. And the thing that I always repeated to myself was like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor. And to see kids these days say things that are so non-traditional and be like, hey, I want to be, I want to like drive cars. I want to be like a pilot or I want to be like a chef. And it honestly is so liberating. And it like lifts so much burden off your shoulders in a way that you don't have to mold your kids into something that they may not want to be, right?
Yeah.
And I always tell Elise, I'm like, babe, you can be whatever you want to be,
Yeah.
I was like, you want to be a chef right now? Sure. We'll like work on it together. We'll give you the tools to learn, right? And if at some point in your life you're like, hey, I want to be a teacher, I'm like, all right, cool. Like, let's give you tools for that. And I think as parents, we should provide tools for our kids to learn things, right? And if they at some point in their life choose that, that's not for them, then we figure it out together. We navigate it together. But yeah, she will get in on her little ladder thing, her stool, and then she'll be like, pull out her knife and her cutting board. And she was like, I'm going to help you prep. And right, she's really into me grilling for some reason. So I've grilled pretty much all of her dinners for the last week and a half.
Oh my God, that's awesome though. I mean, it's like the best way to like really savor meat and produce, Yeah.
She's all on it. And she was like, Mama, I think we should grill something today. I'm like, oh yeah. What
Yeah.
it was broken. I think you can have some beef and some chicken, and I'm like, okay. It's like,
Yes, that's awesome. And speaking of learning tools, I have your books from such a long time ago. Oh, they make me so happy. I mean, I love this is Elisa Eats, and she's eating whatever she wants to cook now.
yeah, isn't it like funny
I
to
love
watch?
it. Ooh,
Yeah, I
it's
illustrated those things, and she remembers me doing that. So she was like, "Mom, can
yeah.
you do that?" And I was like, "Sure."
That's great. That's great. And yeah, I mean, even with our kids, like we'll try and speak to them in Hindi, but obviously it's not, all throughout the day. But a lot of the like foods, colors, they identify that with, that
Mhm.
term. So whether it's Hindi or Urdu, it's like, oh, mango, lal, red, and it's the sweetest thing.
Yeah,
So
we
I love
were,
it.
I think when she first started going to school, this was like after the pandemic. We put like obviously like I felt like all the kids went through social anxiety of some sort.
Yeah.
We actually took those books to her school and put it in the school library because that's what was like familiar to her when it
Oh,
came to like reading and being home. And she would actually like pick those up, and the teachers would tell us that she would like pick those up and she would go sit down, and that would like help her calm down because that's what she knew. And I was like, I'm glad we were able to kind of provide that for her in some way. And again, because it's said Elisa Eats, so she also got to brag about it to her friends, like, hey, this book is about me.
about me? Yeah.
So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, what advice do you have for like those who are content creators too? Because you've seen such success and tremendous growth over the years, and I really do attribute this to your authenticity. But you're covering everything. You went from fashion and beauty to food. So how does someone who's just starting out or might have some level of following stick it out and feel like, okay, you'll get there. You'll be in this echelon at some point.
I think when people like first start, their focus is always on like creating the best kind of content, and finding some sort of a niche.
Mhm.
And while that may work for some, it doesn't always work for all. And I think what has really helped me grow in the social media space, or just life in general, has been that I allow myself to evolve in whatever season of life I'm in, right? You have to embrace it. You can't fake your day to day. It's just, if it comes naturally to you, it would translate well into your content and people will be able to see it for what it is. But
Yeah.
now, if I like, overly curated everything in my life and I didn't talk about the ups and downs of life, or, different chapters of my life, I may have stopped being a content creator, right? Because it wasn't for me. I've always, been the person that was online, offline. Um,
Yes.
and that's very important. So while, overly curated stuff seems so wonderful, right? There does come a point in your life where that becomes very exhausting to keep up with.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of like let yourself grow, don't rush it. Take life for what it is. Be consistent, but not in the way of like amping up your production and just like putting out content like every few hours or like every day. You know, try a few things, try a few platforms. Don't leave stones unturned. Take opportunities for what they are. Network, talk to people. The worst thing that can happen to you is that somebody saying no. But what if
Yeah.
they said yes? You know?
Yes, it's
Um,
like, yeah. Mhm.
don't limit yourself. And I think sometimes we are our worst critic, and then we are what keeps us from growing. So kind of just like let yourself be, let life be, and it will work out.
Yes, yes, that's great advice. Now let's go on a little virtual joyride with Lexus because they are sponsoring this series of AAPI Voices. And so if we were to pretend like we're in a Lexus, let's just talk about all things that we love about being in the car, because as moms, it's like I feel like your sleep is one third of your life. Maybe another third is being in the car.
Honestly, yes.
Yeah.
Like, if there's anything that makes me feel like I'm having me time, is being in my car.
Yeah.
Like, the car is either parked in the garage or in a parking lot somewhere and the music is blasting and I'm just sipping on my iced latte. Because if I don't get to have that in every day, I think I'd probably be like a wild person.
Oh, that's awesome. And so relatable. So relatable. Yeah. I think it's like I definitely meditate in there and eat lunch in there and sometimes have like my laptop balanced on the steering wheel. Like it's just it's so crazy. Definitely phone scrolling content. Yeah. And then of course what it's used for, which is to get from point A to point B.
I
Uh,
joke around about this and I was like, there's nothing like taking that like 30-second nap at a red light in a car. Like you're waiting for the light to turn green, you just close your eyes for a little bit, you're like, oh yeah, I'm rejuvenated.
yes, I know. Honk. It's let me know. Are we moving? Yeah. Okay, so if you were to decide on a road trip to take with your kids, um, where would that be?
So the kids love any sort of waterfront or like a farm.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few farms and ranches here in Texas that are like about 2 to 3 hours. So honestly, like if I could just take them to like a farm and like rent a little cabin on the farm or a ranch, that's like a thing that we wanted to do. And then we also kind of wanted to take a road trip to Atlanta to visit my family and kind of go through New Orleans and like do a little pit stops in a few places and like show the kids around and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, what about just the snacks? Because we always need snacks. Kids definitely, but moms do too. So what do you stash away in the car?
So for me, it has to be like some sort of chocolate. Right now, I'm like hooked on Reese's peanut butter cups. If I could just like eat packs of it, I would. With the girls, Eliza needs to have seaweed.
Mm-hmm.
So we like have the seaweed, like massive Costco size seaweeds in our pantry that I have in the car for her. And then Azina, honestly, anything sweet will do for her. She
Oh.
loves sour gummies. And so I always have like, either like graham crackers for her in the car and seaweed for Elise. And then I'll have like my stash of like chocolates in the corner somewhere.
You have everybody covered. That's so great. What are some of the jams that you play? Because again, it's like you're gonna have your list, Nabil, the girls, like what's just like the eclectic music?
We're all over the place. Our playlist is confused. We go from like listening to Let It Go from Frozen to like a Punjabi song because I love Punjabi music. And then, Nabil into like, rap and hip hop. And then we'll like go there and then we come back to like country because I'm also a Southern belle. So I'm like, here's country music. So it's like our playlist, our suggestions are so wild. I don't think we can ever get out of this rut that it is, but
Oh my God, I love it though.
it's so funny
That
because
is so funny. I can already picture it's like we're gonna go from like Diljit and like Guru Randava to Carrie Underwood. You know?
yeah.
Yeah, and like Chenny Press, what's his name?
Teddy Swims, like
Yeah.
anything, just literally any like everything around. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
everywhere.
that's awesome. And Lexus has this slogan that's standard of amazing. And I think it's so important as just individuals, and especially like you who has a platform. What would you say your standard of amazing is, and what really brings you this sense of fulfillment in life?
I think for me, it's just being able to embrace life, and not being so fixated on certain things in life. Like, oh, if you're having bad days, just be so fixated on that part of your life because there's always more. And honestly, just being yourself. And I think we always talk about giving other people grace, but I think you have to allow yourself some grace too, right? Like, we do a lot. We wear a lot of hats. We do so many things. You're a wife, you're a mom, are the oldest daughter, you're a sister, you are running your own company, you're doing, you're a chef. Like having to wear all those hats and then being, you know, feeling worn out or not feeling like you're enough at the end of the day is not something I could let myself feel. So I think I've given myself a little bit more grace now. I'm like, if things are not working out, but they will. So for me, it's always like, give yourself grace, let life be, allow yourself to grow and evolve, and things will come full circle. Um, and honestly, just spending time with family,
Yeah.
like having great company and like being with family is something that I will take any day and every day.
Oh, that's the best. And because the show is called That Total Mom Sense, I do feel like, I try and remind, the listeners or anyone I meet, and you don't have to be a parent to have this, but it's our intuition. And some of us are really like tuned in to what that is. So if you could share a mom sense moment, a moment where you were like, my inner voice has got this figured out. I know what to do here.
Oh my God, this was actually weirdly. So I think a couple of years back we had taken a trip, together as a family, and Lisa was like sick. And the thing is, like, I always like believe in advocating for your kid when it comes to like their health, because they can't talk for themselves, and you kind of have to like really tune in with everything. And I remember like everybody around me would say like I overanalyze things, and I'm like, if I feel something, I really tune into it, and I have to kind of at least explore to why I'm feeling X thing. And Elisa was not doing well, and I had been monitoring her like a hawk. And one day I was just like, I don't care what anybody's saying. I need to take her to the doctor because, like, this isn't just like a normal cold. It can't be a normal cold. I remember just kind of like shutting everybody out. And I was like, even if nothing comes out to it, at least like we took her in, like we can see what's going on with her. And we took her in, and it turned out that she had pneumonia, croup, and RSV at the same time.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I was pregnant with Azina at that time,
Oh.
and I remember sitting in the hospital and just like tears rolling down my face, and I'm like, you knew this in your gut, like
Right.
you should have just like done it. And I've just like told myself that yeah, there's always going to be outside noise of what things should be or could be, but if you feel something so strongly in your gut as like a mother or just as a person, there has to be a reason why you feel that way. So just
Yeah.
explore it a little. And if nothing comes out of it, fine, like great. But what if like, you were right about the situation and like it
Yeah.
worked out. Um
Exactly.
for me
People
now
try
it's
to like talk you out of it, like, oh, it's not a big
yeah,
deal. And you're like, no, I have a inner knowing that's like telling me it
yeah.
is a big deal.
Yeah, I think when we involve like too many voices to give
Yeah.
us opinions, we actually cloud our own judgment. And I think if you feel so strongly, if it's giving you anxiety in some way, then it's worth exploring.
Right. Right. 100%. That is so, so great. I love that.
So
And I
needless to say, like every time I have like a gut feeling about like like somebody being sick, I'm like, nope, get out of my way. We're doing
yeah,
this one.
let me
We're not. Yeah, no.
yeah, you get the last say. It's like, let me tell you,
Yeah, let me
what's
tell
up.
you where I've been.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh my gosh, that's great. Well, as we wrap up, if you could share, any last thoughts, advice for our community, especially being, a leader in the AAPI space.
I think I see like people in our community, and I see women in our community, and there's this stereotype around your 30s that in your 30s you can't start over,
Mm,
or you can't reinvent yourself because you've lived through your 20s and you should have just figured everything out in your 20s. But what I will say to that is like, yeah, your 20s are great and all, but the way you get the confidence in your 30s is by far the best thing that can happen to you. Um, so don't be hesitant to start over, whether it's in a relationship or it's in a career or it's just reinventing yourself in different parts of your life. Don't be afraid.
yeah,
Life is about evolution, and you have to allow yourself to do that. For anyone who's like watching this, honestly, I will say like if you feel like you need to start over, do it.
just
There's
do it.
no harm in it.
Yes, yes. And that comes back to this inner voice that's probably telling you to anyway. So just
Yeah.
listen to it.
Yeah.
That's
I
great.
just so many people who are just like so hesitant about it. Like, oh, what if
Mhm.
I start over in a relationship and, I may not find love again, or like, I'm a parent, so I can't do this, or I can't do a career because I have kids, or I can't do a pivot because, you know, what people will say at this point in life. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
but those people aren't really paying your bills for one, and they're not you. And it would be nicer, and honestly, give yourself grace again.
Mhm.
And you rather do it now versus like 20 years down the line where you're like, oh snap, maybe I should have done something in my 30s.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. I love it. And tell our audience where they can find you and where all of us can support you.
you can find me on Instagram. I've been there for like almost a decade. um, at MARYAM ISHTIAQ. You can also find me on TikTok, MARYAM ISHTIAQ _.
And then your brand.
Yeah, it's actually.co.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to be here, and thank you for doing this and shedding light on so many people in your community and just people in general. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to AAPI Voices, brought to you by Lexus, only on That's Total Mom Sense podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And follow us at Kanika Chadda Gupta and Lexus USA on social media. Remember to trust your mom sense and dad sense, stay proud of your roots, and keep driving forward.
Thanks for listening to this episode of That's Total Mom Sense. You can listen to the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for That's Total Mom Sense. You can learn more about my guests by logging on to www.thatstotalmomsense.com. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active on social media. My handle is at Kanika Chadda Gupta. And if you have ideas for show topics or guests you can't wait to have on the show, write to me at thatstotalmomsense@gmail.com. And lastly, please rate, review, and subscribe to That's Total Mom Sense if you haven't already. Thanks for being in my tribe.